Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inside Pack Sports. We got a special episode for you today. We're going to start a series off where we're going to open the vault, so to speak. We're going to go back into some of NC State's all-time best and sometimes worst recruiting stories and talk about what happened behind the scenes, what were the implications of what ultimately went down. And we're starting off with one that's not in the too far distant past. We're talking Bam Adebayo, how he almost ended up at NC State, what went wrong, and ultimately how that impacted the season. So joined by James today. How long have you been in the recruiting game now, James, or covering the recruiting game?
Man, I started when I was a student at NC State, I think back in 2000. I remember on the basketball side going to you remember the old Bob Gibbons Tournament of Champions
Yeah.
they used to have? I would go to those. And so, yeah, going on, what's that, 25 years, man? Damn, I'm getting old. So I've got a lot of stories here. I'm going to need you to help jog my memory on some of them. But I think Bam is a great choice to kind of kick off this series because that was a recruitment back in, I think it was 2015, 2016 that had some rumors and behind the scenes on things that were going on, some ups and downs and different types of things that ultimately led with him ending up at Kentucky.
Okay. So with Bam, why don't you start off? When's like kind of the first time you remember him popping up on NC State's radar? How did that recruitment kind of get kicked off, and what was the kind of momentum that NC State had early on in that recruitment?
Well, the thing about Bam Adebayo is anybody who obviously have watched him now with the Miami Heat or saw him with Kentucky, physically he just jumps off the page right away, even now. And the crazy thing is, as an eighth grader and a ninth grader, he was the same. From Pine Tops, North Carolina, out that way, was a guy who, I mean, just was such a physical force as like I said, a freshman in high school. It was a no-brainer he was going to be highly regarded. It was no-brainer he was going to command a ton of attention. And so NC State right away, along with other programs like, I think early on for him, obviously being from the eastern part of the state, you saw East Carolina get involved, Virginia Tech was involved, North Carolina eventually offered, NC State was in the mix. But it was early. It was early that at the time, NC State staff, Mark Gottfried, Orlando Early were handling his recruitment. So they were involved in his recruitment. But yeah, I mean, this was a guy who there was no doubt that Bam Adebayo was going to be a top 25, top 50 type player, top 10, top 15, because he was that from the moment he got to the high school level. I mean, he was just a physical force. And he was one of those guys, Jake, you watch him play and you look at him physically and you say, okay, at minimum, no brainer, he's an ACC guy.
Yeah.
And then it's just a matter of where he gets to, which eventually was the McDonald's All American, lottery pick, all those different things.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I like that to me, that kind of era of high school basketball, maybe even a little before it, was like peak hoop mixtapes like days.
Mm-hmm.
Every week you would have a new video of just guys, and it kind of culminated, I think, with Zion was like the jumping the shark moment with that crew, in that kind of era of high school basketball coverage. But I'm curious from your perspective, how close was NC State to landing at a bio?
Oh, extremely close. They led for the majority of his recruitment the last couple of years. And I think if I remember correctly, and I'm going this off of 10 years memories, right? I think Bam was in the 2016 class. I know that, and I'll tell you why in a second. I can always know the year, but I think if you go to 2014, 2015, when he was a sophomore, junior, senior in high school, NC State was always right there. Got him on campus, was local for him. They outworked the North Carolinas and those teams. But then I want to say the spring of his recruitable year, so going into the fall when he's going to sign, I want to say it was that spring that Kentucky offered and seriously got involved. Well, that's when it gets real, right? Because that was John Calipari. That's when he was on his run of just talent after talent. They were landing, bringing in great players. And so it got a little tougher for NC State with Bam. But they had built such strong relationships with him, his mother. I believe at the time his AAU coach was another factor in NC State's corner. that they had made it to the finalists. They were one of the finalists for him. I want to say he took official visits to NC State, um, Kentucky, maybe Auburn was in there as well. And so he went all the way down. It went down to November for him, where he took the Kentucky visit in October. I think the last visit he took was the NC State at the end of October. So you thinking still we're in great shape. You're going into November where he's going to announce his decision and his commitment and all those things, and NC State's right there. And the other side of this that folks will remember from his recruitment, there was a lot of speculation for a couple of years, Jake, that he'd be playing with Dennis Smith on the college level. They were close friends. Both of them were from the state of North Carolina. They played AAU basketball together. So there was always this like, okay, this could be kind of a partnership
The
or
old
however you want to
package
label it.
deal.
Yeah, the old package deal that you want to get in terms of bringing both guys in. And so that was another thing that was in NC State's corner too, because if you're Bam, I mean, you got a guy like Dennis Smith with his talent as a point guard and his playmaking ability. That was going to be a lot of fun. Right? It was going to be a lot of fun for NC State to be able to bring those two. So they were working that angle, and so they were right there in the mix. And unfortunately, Kentucky was able to get it done, like Kentucky's able to get it done. I'm gonna cover my mic because I can tell folks why. But there were always rumors. Like if you want to go how crazy rumors were back in the day, Jake, on like, now it's funny thinking back on it now with NIL and revenue share, how you can just pay players whatever you want to pay them. But back then you clearly couldn't do that. And there were rumors that Kentucky was funneling money to players and their families through horse racing, right? Like in terms of finding ways to get these high level horses of them that the parents could turn around and sell for cash. I mean, it's crazy theories and rumors you heard. There was rumors I heard that Bam's mom got a new home or a new car. Again, rumors, speculate. I don't know if it's true. Trust me, I don't want to get sued for any of this. I don't think I will. But just that's the way recruiting was back then. There were always things going on behind the scenes. Look, we know a couple years later, these same rumors came out on Dennis Smith, Jake, right? So we're not saying anything that is not likely going to have some merit to it. But when you ask how close was NC State, they were right there. They were right there. And then we can kind of talk into in a little bit how that played out for NC State. But Bam Adebayo was so close to being a player who would be wearing the red and white for the Wolfpack.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and it's going to sting when we start talking about the implications of how that impacted NC State's program. But from your perspective, I guess, was there anything else that maybe never made it onto the message board or never made it as like a confirmed thing that you were hearing outside of the horse trading, typical Kentucky stuff that you just never reported on but heard? Because that happens. I mean, to give people some perspective, I mean, you hear things all the time and some stuff that you could even confirm sometimes as true, but you just, out of respect for sources, can't ever share at the time. But now, given the years that have passed.
Yeah, there was speculation that there was a coach involved. I don't know if it was a high school. I can't remember if it was a high school assistant, the high school head coach, maybe an AAU assistant. I can't remember which type of coach, but there was speculation that a coach was involved that was directly trying to push him to Kentucky as opposed to NC State, and stressing the upside of playing at Kentucky and that pipeline. Like the thing that you were dealing with at that time for programs like NC State, and it wasn't just NC State, it was anybody going against Kentucky, was the gauntlet of draft picks that you just had for John Calipari at the time, right? I mean, it just felt every year they were getting players drafted at Kentucky. And so you could just continue to just, like, it was just a rolling number. I want to say by the time he left Kentucky, I want to say he had 50 NBA draft picks during his tenure there. And so, look, if you're a top 10, top 15 player and you're looking at, and Kentucky's interested in you, it got to a point there where they were having players drafted on, hey, they went to Kentucky and they were a freshman. They must be good, right? I mean, because trust me, all of them didn't hit on the NBA level. But a lot of it was because of what they had built from a reputation standpoint. So looking back on it, I wouldn't blame a coach or a mentor or a parent for getting in a player's corner and saying, hey, maybe you should seriously consider Kentucky, because they've proven they could get players to the college level or to the NBA level. And like I said, I mean, I think that was enticing for Bam. I want to say a few years earlier, you had that run, obviously, of John Wall, DeMarcus Cousins, Patrick Patterson. I mean, I can go on the list of names. I mean, Anthony Davis was a couple years um, before Bam. So there was a ton of talent that they were putting into the NBA, and I think that was what I'd heard was that there was a coach specifically that was in Kentucky's corner that kind of was more almost steering Bam in that direction.
Let me ask you this, James. If you were to take Bam out of 2016 and put him in today's recruiting world, with how things are set up now and how recruiting operates, do you think the decision remains the same, or is this one where you think maybe NC State's able to get it done?
So you're saying when with rev share can kind of even out the game a little
Yeah,
bit?
rev share, NIL, all of that stuff is
And it's
front
funny
and
I'm
center.
saying this because we know NC State got into some trouble for doing some things a couple years later after the Bam situation, right? So I'm not, trust me when I'm saying, I'm not saying NC State was totally 100% on board, like, and a lot of programs weren't at that time. We all know that now looking back
Yeah.
on it. But yeah, I mean, I think the natural ties of being an in-state player help all the time with recruiting, right? Like it has to help. And so I think that gets your foot in the door for a player of his caliber. We just mentioned it earlier. I mean, this was the same recruiting class, if I remember correctly, with Dennis Smith. So you had another top 10, top 15 player in the country in the state of North Carolina as well, who you landed. And Dennis had other opportunities to go other places also. And so I think with revenue share and NIL, certainly NC State would have had a great chance with Bam. I think if all things were equal, and I mean that just kind of saying if all things were equal, I think he probably wears an NC State uniform, which is why that one was so, I think, hurt so much for NC State was because they really felt like they were going to land Bam Adebayo.
Mm. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, you said you would never forget it was 2016 and you'd get into why later. What was how do you remember the 2016 thing?
Well, because I know in 2017, NC State was hiring a new head coach. And when I say we're a year ahead, he signed in 20, I think he signed in 2015 because that's going
Yeah.
into his senior year. But I knew he was going to graduate being a 2016 class. And I just always remember it because, I mean, when I go to, okay, what ended Mark Gottfried's tenure? Well, I know it was Dennis Smith's freshman year. And I know Dennis Smith and Bam were in the same class. So, yeah,
Yeah.
2016, 2017. And we were talking about this off air, the impact of what if you had landed Bam Adebayo. Well, I looking back on it, Jake, forgot how strong that roster was that NC State had under Mark Gottfried his final year. And I don't know. I remember. I mean, if you think about one of the like endearing memory, well, I won't say endearing. Well, probably the best memory I have from that season, and you still see clips of it now. It's the Dennis Smith dunk
The
after the
dunk
horn.
at the end of Duke.
Yeah, at the end of the Duke game, right? I mean, and who would have thought? You win that game 84-82, and NC State finishes out the season. Look, I'm pulling it up now, so I'm not saying all this off memory, but they finish out the season losing 9 out of 10 games after that Duke win. And when I say losing games, I mean you're losing games by 24 to Florida State, 25 to Louisville. You lose to Carolina by 24. I mean, just some big losses. And it all kind of steamrolled against Mark Gottfried and his staff, and
Mm-hmm.
and you saw the end of his tenure there. But that roster that year, man, I mean, I'm gonna read you some of the names on the roster for that year. And when you look back on it, you say this team finished the year. What they finish it? You know, well, it's funny. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page, and it's got State 0-14 and 0-17. I assume because of the NCAA rules, they wiped away any wins from that season. I didn't even realize Wikipedia caught up on that. But yeah, I mean, you think about Malik Abu, um, Leonard Freeman, Torrin Doran, Terry Henderson, Dennis Smith. I mean, Dennis Smith arrived at NC State as a true freshman without Bam Adebayo. He was ACC Rookie of the Year and second team All ACC. on a team that got the head coach fired, Jake. That tells you how good Dennis Smith was, right? We
Yeah.
know Dennis Smith was a top 10 pick in the draft. I mean, you had Dennis Smith on that roster. Markel Johnson was a true freshman. Omer Yurtseven was a true freshman. That's another one we can talk about. I can't remember the exact timelines. Do you end up with Omer Yurtseven if you get Bam Adebayo? Maybe
Yeah.
not, right? And we know Omer did not have the big year there that year, but you had BJ Anya, Maverick Rowan was on that team.
Oh,
But
Maverick Rowan.
the reason I think Bam would have made such a difference on that team, Jake, is because he's not your traditional star. And what I mean by that is like we talked about the type of year Dennis Smith had, right? I mean, Dennis
Mm-hmm.
Smith put up numbers. Bam is like what I would label like an elite level role player. Right, like he's the type of guy who does all the dirty work for you, but he does it at an elite level, where you can throw that onto any team, I believe, and you get so much better. So if you would have put Bam on that team, and this is a guy who's going to defend, he's going to just gobble up rebounds, he's going to finish everything around the rim with dunks, he's going to give you a high level of efficiency. If you put that on that team, it really could have made a difference because let's be honest, I think a lot of times that we know that season kind of snowballed out, right? It snowballed the other way, but it could have easily snowballed the other way if things had went well.
Yeah.
And so I really think Bam would have made a massive impact on that season because of the type of player he was. Like I said, he was another player who was drafted in the top 10 of draft.
Yeah. Well, that is a tough one to think about as an NC State fan. And it's curious how it would have affected NC State's history if you keep Mark Gottfried for another couple of years.
Mhm.
You never know, but that's the point of these kind of retrospectives. And we'll have some more. And if you're a subscriber at Inside Pack Sports, we're going to put a topic on the message boards to have you guys suggest what we do next. I'm sure there are lots of questions and curiosities around some high profile recruitments, both on the basketball and football side. Maybe we get into coaching searches as well. I know James probably has some
Mhm.
skeletons ready to talk about there, but we'll keep doing these. So we appreciate everyone being here today. For James, I'll go ahead and say thank you guys. Look forward to hearing your input, and we'll see you guys on the next one.